On a frigid December morning in 1944, German tank commanders near the Belgian hamlet of Noval faced a phenomenon that defied logic. Enemy armor materialized through the mist, delivered devastating blows to their Panthers' vulnerable sides, then evaporated before gunners could even rotate their weapons. Attack after attack came from wildly different angles. Intelligence officers frantically cabled 2nd Panzer Division Command with stunning news. An entire American armored division had engaged them at Noval. Their assessment was spectacularly wrong. What they'd encountered was actually a modest force of tank destroyers, machines weighing merely 18 tons with armor so thin, a well-placed shot would punch straight through. The difference? German crews never managed to land that shot. Meet the M18 Hellcat, World War II's fastest tracked combat vehicle. That December day outside Bastogne, velocity proved more lethal than steel plating. Germany's war industry had produced the most terrifying armored vehicles on Earth. Tigers and Panthers could obliterate Allied tanks from distances exceeding 1,600 meters. Yet these mechanical behemoths harbored a critical weakness that engineers never adequately addressed: turret rotation speed. The Tiger I relied on hydraulic systems powered by its main transmission. Running at maximum engine speed, crews could swing the turret 360 degrees in roughly 1 minute. But battlefield conditions rarely allowed high RPMs. During actual combat, stationary or creeping forward with engines barely above idle, that same rotation consumed up to 4 agonizing minutes. When hydraulics failed entirely, crews resorted to manual cranking, 720 handwheel revolutions for 1 complete circle. Panthers performed better, but remained compromised. At typical combat engine speeds, rotating just 90 degrees consumed 15 to 20 seconds. This wasn't merely inconvenient. Against the right opponent, it was absolutely fatal. In 1941, Lieutenant Colonel Andrew Davis Bruce assumed leadership of the Tank Destroyer Tactical and Firing Center with a singular mission: develop methods to defeat German panzers. Bruce meticulously examined the Blitzkrieg. He dissected every battle where Allied armor had met panzer units and been destroyed. His conclusion contradicted fundamental army assumptions about mechanized warfare. Tank destroyers needed speed, not armor; agility over endurance; strike and vanish, not stand and trade blows. His reasoning was elegant. German tanks boasted thick frontal protection and devastating firepower. Confronting them directly guaranteed annihilation. However, German armor moved sluggishly, their turrets even more so, and their flank protection was comparatively weak. A rapid vehicle could reach a panzer's side before its gun could track the threat, deliver a killing blow, and disappear before supporting tanks could respond. Military leadership considered his ideas reckless. They authorized the vehicle regardless. For the crews who would operate them, Bruce's philosophy meant something terrifying: betting their survival on being faster than enemy gunners. Buick Motor Division received the contract in 1942, assigning Harley Earl's design team, the same creative minds that would later craft the iconic tail-finned Cadillacs, to the project. Their creation was radically different from anything in America's armored inventory. The M18 tipped the scales at just 18 tons. Panthers weighed 45. Tigers, 57. This dramatic weight reduction came from stripping armor to nearly nothing. The frontal hull measured 13 millimeters thick. The turret face barely reached 25 millimeters. Standard infantry rifles wouldn't penetrate it. Practically everything else would. Crews examining the specifications were genuinely alarmed. 13 millimeters wasn't protection. It was barely a shell. Soldiers joked the metal existed solely to block wind. Inside that hull, you weren't defended, just concealed. Power came from a Wright R975 radial engine, the same aircraft power plant used in Shermans, but installed in a vehicle half the mass. This combination produced a top speed of 55 miles per hour, making it World War II's fastest tracked armored vehicle. They christened it appropriately the Hellcat. The statistics told a compelling story. At 30 miles per hour, an M18 covered 44 feet every second. During the 15 seconds a Panther needed to rotate 90 degrees, a Hellcat traveled over 600 feet. 200 yards of lateral displacement. Enough distance to stay ahead of the gun barrel. German gunners faced an impossible equation: aim ahead and gamble. The target maintains course, or track it and watch rounds impact empty ground. Either choice likely resulted in a miss. And you'd get only one attempt, because while you traversed, that Hellcat was already aiming a 76mm shell at your vulnerable side armor. The M18's turret rotated quickly, but that wasn't the decisive advantage. The entire vehicle could relocate faster than a German turret could swing. That was survival mathematics. At Bastogne, those equations would face their ultimate test. December 1944 brought the Wehrmacht's final desperate gamble in the Ardennes. The 705th Tank Destroyer Battalion supported the 101st Airborne at Bastogne. When 2nd Panzer Division armor threatened Noval north of the town, the 705th moved to reinforce defensive positions. They joined Team de Sobry, a composite force of Shermans, Hellcats, and paratroopers from the 506th, commanded by 26-year-old Major William Dessobry, who was about to engage an entire Panzer division. Dense fog reduced engagements to point-blank range. At such distances, the Hellcats' minimal armor became a death sentence if Germans could land hits. Inside the M18S, tension was unbearable. The open-top design meant no roof protection. Crews endured freezing precipitation, sniper threats, and deafening combat noise. Through the fog, every shadow resembled a tiger. The 705th perfected a technique that became legendary. A Hellcat would sprint to a Noval Street intersection. Crews would identify a Panther through the mist, fire once into its flank, then reverse at maximum speed. By the time the Panther's turret swung to return fire, the Hellcat had vanished behind structures, down alleys, repositioning for another strike. Moments later, the same destroyer would emerge on the German column's opposite side. Another shot, another kill, another disappearance. German forces couldn't track their movements. Each time they oriented toward one threat, another materialized elsewhere. Reports to 2nd Panzer headquarters grew increasingly frantic. They believed they faced a complete American armored division. In reality, one reinforced battalion, a 26-year-old major, and tank destroyers whose primary defense was simply moving faster than death. Velocity couldn't protect everyone. With only 13 millimeters of steel, any penetrating hit proved catastrophic. German 75mm rounds passed completely through both hull sides. Crews caught in the open perished. Those who miscalculated timing died. And the unlucky faced grim reality. The M18's open turret meant artillery airbursts or mortar rounds didn't require direct hits to be lethal. Shrapnel fell directly onto exposed crewmen. It was a swift vehicle, but it became a cold, open tomb if you stopped moving. Colonel Templeton pushed his soldiers relentlessly because he understood the alternative meant certain death. Static positions equaled annihilation. Movement equaled survival. Throughout December 19th and 20th, Team Dessobry and the 705th destroyed over 30 German tanks around Noval. The village ultimately fell. The American force was too small to hold against 2nd Panzer's full weight. But they'd purchased time, critical hours for the 101st Airborne to establish the defensive perimeter that would hold Bastogne. Templeton survived the bulge and continued commanding the 705th through Germany. On March 1st, 1945, an artillery shell struck his command position. He never witnessed the victory his tactics helped secure. 4 months later, a different Hellcat unit would validate those same principles in an entirely different theater. The 805th Tank Destroyer Battalion was Italy's only unit fully equipped with M18s, commanded by Lieutenant Colonel Herbert Fowler. Crews painted unauthorized black cat insignias on their turrets, a cartoon feline biting a tank against an orange background. Command ordered removal of the markings. They refused. It was minor defiance, but significant. Operating the theater's most vulnerable vehicles, that cat logo represented their defiant spirit. If death came, it would come to soldiers with their own identity. April 1945 brought the Allies' final Italian offensive. After months grinding through Apennine mountain passes, the Po Valley spread before them like a pool table. German forces retreated northward, columns of trucks, half-tracks, and tanks streaming toward Alpine safety. Soldiers called what followed the rat race. The Po Valley was ideal Hellcat terrain, flat, open, unobstructed. The 805th found themselves driving parallel to retreating German columns, not behind, but alongside them. At 30 miles per hour, they'd pull even and open fire. The 76mm guns raked trucks, half-tracks, and tanks from the flank. German gunners desperately cranked turrets, but geometry made success impossible. By the time guns rotated, the firing Hellcat had already advanced 200 yards down the column. It was mechanized drive-by shooting. Because the 805th was the theater's only Hellcat battalion, German intelligence was thoroughly confused. A black cat spotted near Boulogne at dawn would be reported 50 miles north by afternoon. By war's end, M18 Hellcats compiled the highest kill ratio of any American tank or tank destroyer, 526 confirmed victories. The overall exchange ratio reached approximately 2.4 to 1, superior to the Sherman, rivaling the heavy-hitting M10 better than any other American armored vehicle. Critics noted that Hellcat crews were elite, extensively trained specialists who might have succeeded in any vehicle. Historian Stephen Zaloga labeled the M18 a poorly balanced design, arguing success stemmed from crew training and dedication rather than vehicle characteristics. Perhaps he was correct, but those soldiers chose their fighting methods. They selected speed, flanking maneuvers, and hit-and-run tactics because the Hellcat enabled such approaches. A different vehicle would have necessitated different tactics. Different tactics might have resulted in higher casualties. The M18 Hellcat was retired almost immediately post-war. Tank destroyer doctrine fell from favor. Future American armor would be heavily protected main battle tanks. The light armor philosophy was abandoned, but the lesson endured. German tankers couldn't hit what they couldn't track. 15 seconds of turret traverse became an eternity against vehicles moving 44 feet per second. Panthers and Tigers were superior tanks by every conventional metric. Thicker armor, larger guns. But conventional metrics didn't account for 18-ton vehicles that could relocate before you finished rotating your turret. At Noval, the 705th used velocity to survive against overwhelming odds. In the Po Valley, the 805th used speed to devastate a retreating army. Both proved identical truth. Sometimes the best armor is simply being somewhere else when the shot arrives. The pursuit moved so rapidly that crews couldn't process captured prisoners. They simply disarmed Germans and pointed them rearward, then continued forward. Adrenaline was constant. Crews later described the chase's surreal quality. Racing past enemy infantry, too stunned to fire, wind whipping through open turrets, feeling more like hunters than soldiers.